Retiring with credit card debt. That's our topic for today. I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Scherer. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. And before we dig into retiring with credit card debt, I want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button, help other people find this information on YouTube. And with that, I'm interested in talking about this because I've got a very simple answer. No, don't do it, right? We're done. Okay.
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. We got a bunch of factors in play.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, this is going to be interesting to see how we talk this through. So in general, we would say no. And there's a couple reasons for that, I would say. First, there's a financial reason that you don't want to retire with credit card debt because you've got this big balance, right? And you don't want it. You don't want to be paying, basically 20% more for everything you purchase, which is what I consider a credit card's symbol of. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then for me, honestly, it's a unworked through issue. Does that make sense? So
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So to me, if you have credit card debt, it symbolizes slightly finances that are not fully conscious. You haven't figured out how to totally emotionally handle your finances, okay? And handle them in a reasonable way. So you're spending too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're spending too much. That's what it's saying.
That's why you have credit card debt, right? Because your income does not enough to cover your ongoing expenses.
Exactly.
Right? Yep.
So you're spending too much, and I don't like to have people set up to run out of money. That's one of the big things that we try to avoid is having people run out of money.
Yep.
Okay. So if you're spending too much and you might run out of money, I want people to work through it. The other thing is that I think there's people can have a lot of shame around credit card debt. And I don't think that's necessary. And it's also, so when I think about it that way, it's like, okay, so not only do you have credit card debt, you have a lot of negative emotions around this. And so I want people to be happier.
Yeah.
And I think being conscious of the situation helps you enjoy what you're actually spending more. So I see it as like, okay, there's some skills that you need here. And part of it is often emotional skills. Like, how do I get past this?
Yeah.
One more thing I want to say is that this is one of those situations that doesn't play well with the partner, like the spouse. So a lot of times the spouse it causes tension in your relationship too.
Yeah. If it's one person driving the credit card debt.
Yeah,
right?
and it can be like a mystery, like how much is it running up, And so you have this whole drama. That's what I think of it as. Yeah. That, boy, wouldn't it be nice to just take a look at it?
Yeah.
I also want to distinguish between... This is an interesting situation because some people really just... struggle with daily living, okay? Like just having enough for that. But then there's this other group of people and I've been able to work with some people that are like this, and it's really cool because they actually earn a decent amount and they religiously save in their 401k and maybe even have some pensions or something on top of that. So they actually have enough money.
Yeah.
But then they really want this credit card drama.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why exactly. They have to kind of discover for themselves. Like, why am I doing this? What are my alternatives? And they generally feel like they have to.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to them, they will say things like, I moved and I had to buy furniture. As if there's no...
They didn't have any furniture before, perhaps.
Well, or there's no used furniture, or there's no, there's no other ways to get furniture other than spending $40,000 or $50,000. Like, okay, so there's always a feeling of I have to, and so
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Like,
Yeah,
I've put a lot out there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot to unpack there,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate. It's interesting as I think about this is, carrying credit card debt. Is it reasonable to do it into retirement? Well, of course, sort of the goal is not to be carrying credit card debt in the first place. So perhaps some of this is not necessarily a retirement
Right.
versus non-retirement
Right.
issue. It's hey, I can't, get out of that cycle of credit card debt, whether I'm 32 and no kids, or 42 and kids in middle school, or 62 and trying to get ready to retire. It's like maybe
Right.
some of the same things with
Right.
different nuances. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another factor, obviously I have a lot to say on this, is that for some people, they are the types that when they don't keep track of their food or think about their diet, but when their pants get too tight,
Yeah, right.
they stop eating.
Yeah. Yep.
And so their credit card
That's why you have
is like their
sweatpants.
belt. Yeah, I know, exactly. But that's the problem.
Right,
It's
yeah, right.
like, this is the person that has kept buying sweatpants.
Yeah, right,
And just
right.
gotten a bigger pair of pants. And so that's it, like having, some people use credit cards that way. Okay, if it gets to X amount, then I know I have to stop spending.
Yeah, right.
But that, again, is not as good of a look in retirement.
Yeah, so it's just interesting where that all the dynamics that play into the whole credit card thing, and of course it's just different these days than it was 20 years ago, because credit cards are ubiquitous as opposed to for the special
20 years
purchases.
ago, they was like that too. 40
years
50,
ago. Okay, so
yeah,
I'm dating
yeah.
myself here, right? But there was a time where it wasn't the case, right? And now you kind of go like, well, geez, having a credit card is it's not just for airline miles anymore.
Well, and you can't even log in
Right.
to your internet without getting barraged with ads that are specifically designed to appeal to you.
Right.
Now, it's not even like they're trying to sell you stuff you don't want anymore.
Right,
No.
right. Yeah, they're trying to sell us stuff I do want,
Yeah.
but just don't need.
Right.
Well, that's one of the other things I wanted to pull out was, you talk about, hey, I moved into a new house and I needed new furniture, right? And it's interesting I call it the lie we tell ourselves, right? And
Right.
that's but it's what do we need
Right.
versus what do I want? I want new furniture, but how often do I really? Or I want whatever it is. How often do I actually need that thing?
Right.
Right, and you can fill in the blank on any number
Well,
of things,
And it can be like, I need pets. I need to have my pet go to the vet. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so then the focus on that, and it's like my response is, okay, you needed to have your pet go to that, but then you thought that was a one-off. You have a
Yeah.
pet. Okay, it's not a one-off.
Right,
You're spending
right.
money on that every month
Right.
or every year. And what about this other stuff over here? Dinner out, vacation, blah, blah, blah. All this
Right,
stuff.
right.
So you can go to the vet.
But at what
But
cost?
then
You can't also do
you
all
can't,
of it, right?
Then just lower this over here.
Right.
Hello.
Right.
Hi, I'm your regular expenses.
Right. But and again, there's those things of that's a great example. Hey, I'm not going to not give my pet vet care.
Right.
But does that means perhaps
I need
then
to,
I don't need to go out for dinner and do that thing, right? Like
Right.
that sort of thing. And even some of the things you can get to an extreme with it, depending on how you look at it. Is, well, I need to put gas in the car. You can make a case for that, certainly. Or there's public transportation. There's bicycle.
Right.
I know somebody who lives on the far east side of Madison and works on the far west side, and they don't have a car. They bike to work every day, and we live in Wisconsin. There's winter that comes around, right? And so you go, do I want to do that? Like, oh, holy mackerel, that is not my cup of tea.
Right.
But do I need to have a car? Oh, wait a minute. What are those things? And perhaps it's some self-reflection on what
Yeah.
is the things that I need versus the things that I want. And it's okay to get things that you want, right? It's not like you should cut those out, but it's sort of that self-awareness. And you mentioned some of that sort of not hard numbers things, right? I'm good at the numbers and the details, but it's how do I make decisions about these things and really think about that, I think can be useful.
Well, and I think for a lot of people, but maybe not everybody, it really can kind of come back to trauma when you were a kid around different items. Mm-hmm. I talked to somebody once who lived in a precarious situation as a kid, and the sheriff knocked at the door. Okay, talk about trauma. That would be
Right,
traumatic for a
right.
kid, anybody. And it doesn't have to be that high. But this person found themselves like once we just started tracking spending, so that's the first thing I suggest to people is track your spending. So when they started tracking spending, they found that they really didn't spend too much, except when they went to the grocery store, they bought a lot of condiment items that,
Yeah, interesting.
that,
Special
like all
ketchups.
those special sauce.
Yeah,
They needed a lot of special sauce. Right. But just with tracking it, they could see
Yeah.
what was going on. And I tracked my spending at the same time with that. And I found myself spending a lot. I was in improv at the time, and I was one of the older people in improv. And so there were some people in improv that were 21 and just
Yeah.
really starting out. So afterwards, we'd all go out to the bar. And
Yep.
of course, like the older people would treat the younger people, and it was it was fun.
Right,
And we,
right.
it was a totally. But then I was looking at these bar bills, and I was like, "Wow, that's
Right,
my special
right.
sauce."
Right,
That's
right.
what I can cut down on. But it didn't occur to me until I
you
started
track
tracking it.
I love
Yeah.
it. It's a nice idea to try to set a budget. Here's what I'm going to spend, but that's really difficult. Looking at what
Yeah.
you have
What
spent,
am I- yeah.
and then making
Well,
some
just
decisions about
taking
it.
a look at it. Like bring a notebook, take a look
Right,
at it.
right.
Okay, you might start getting some insight into what's going on.
Right, because the money can just go. That's I've got similar examples. I mean, those are great things just to track that. And I think ultimately, getting the credit card debt issue, going into retirement for me, it's that cash flow thing. Like, listen, if
Yeah.
your cash flow is not under control, we can say, because we need to project out, well,
Right.
how much are you spending, and let's put it into a retirement projection to see how that looks. If that number is not realistic, it's just a recipe for disaster. And I think for me anyway, the credit card debt would be that red flag. That's
It's
the
a red
canary in
flag,
the coal
yeah.
mine.
Right.
It's not like you can't retire with debt at work. I mean, but that's the canary in the coal mine. What is it signaling is the really critical thing, I think, for people to think about.
Yeah, and there's some other resources too. I just want to mention a few, just to give people
awesome.
ideas. Again, because you might need to dig deeper than what we're just saying in 10 minutes. We haven't solved your problem. I don't know why. But, but a couple of resources. One is Barbara Stanny Huson, who has a more approach to rewiring your brain and also looking at some of these experiences and doing a lot of writing, and she's got groups too. But another real popular one is Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really good with this stuff.
Yeah.
We've never talked about him
Right.
on the show, but
Right.
he's great with this. How to not spend.
Yep.
Another free resource is Debtors Anonymous. And sometimes people think I don't need to go to that extreme.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you'll see people who are worse off than you, first of all. But it's just this whole compulsion.
Knowing you're not alone.
And again, knowing you're not alone, have people to call, have a support group. Those three resources that I would say.
That's awesome. Hey, that's a great place to wrap things up here. Again, I'm John Scherer. I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. John and I are both proud members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, and you can find out more about them at acplanners.org. It's a group of like-minded financial planners, and there's advisors in all the U.S.
And don't forget, hit that subscribe button.